I want to point out a few things that maybe will help you and your church. Some things that you can identify with what's a correct church and what's a counterfeit church. And it's all everything I'm going to say is based off of what happened to these seven churches in the book of Revelation. Now, one of the things that stands out the most is no accountability for sin. If you were in a church where, let's say certain spiritual leaders are doing things that are obviously wrong, and it's not addressed, and those folks are not either pushed out of those positions or told there needs to be some correction. Well, you're in a church of no accountability, and that was the problem. A lot of these churches in the book of Revelation, they were going without any accountability. And here you have, the Apostle John saying, hey, this is what God says. This is what Jesus says about your church. So be very careful of churches that don't get rid of sin within their camp. Judgment starts in the house of the Lord. The problem is the devil has twisted that around and tells a lot of Christians that, oh no, we shouldn't judge anyone. Wrong. It says, no, in your house, in that church, you need to make sure that you are not offending the Lord by allowing sin to be encamped in your church. So be very careful when there's no accountability, because that will lead to sin within the church. Philadelphia and Smyrna, of the two, I would say that Philadelphia was one of those churches that was just passing the grade. In other words, it was like, you just passed the test on this one. You barely made it. And why do I say that? Is because of the two churches, Smyrna, there was no criticism of Smyrna. And I'll get to that in a second. But Philadelphia, it was said, hey, you were loyal to Christ. You obey Jesus, but you have little strength or power. In other words, you're just barely floating by. You're just basically cruising over the passing rate. Now, Smyrna, on the other hand, was a church that was commended, never criticized in the book of Revelation, in those first 3 chapters. It says that you always remain faithful, Smyrna. You faced prison time, persecution, death, suffering, poverty, and they were considered spiritually rich. So what does that all mean? Does that mean we have to sell everything, go poor? And no, it doesn't. What it means is Smyrna was one of those churches that was all out for Jesus. In other words, it didn't matter if they were going to get arrested. They were going to get the message of Christ out there to their community. And that is the church that is the true church. Really 1 in 7 churches that was basically the gold star church was Smyrna. And the reason why they were the gold star church is because it didn't matter what happened to them. They were going to get the message of Christ's love out to their community. Now, the gospel is important. Jesus commanded, go into all the world. In Matthew 28, he says, go into the world and tell people about Christ. Now, if that's not the church's goal that you attend, then more than likely you are in a counterfeit church. Or you may be in a church that's just skating by like Philadelphia. Smyrna was a very good example of what we need today in the church.